Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Daisel. I'm a student counselor at the Unisa Directorate for Counselling and Career Development. A very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us this afternoon. We are looking forward to hearing more about interview skills. So just a couple of announcements before we start with the presentation. You might have noticed that your camera and microphone are currently disabled, but we will enable these during the Q&A session that will take place just after the presentation. You are, however, encouraged to post any questions or comments you have in the Q&A as well as the chat during the session. We just ask that you don't share any personal information, that is your personal email address or telephone number, in the chat or the Q&A. We are recording the session and you will receive an email with a link to the recording, and we will also be publishing an edited version of the recording on our YouTube channel that I will share with you later on. So just our program for today, I'm doing the welcome now. I will also do the introduction. Mrs. Mandu Makanyo, who usually joins us during these sessions, is not able to be with us today. Then we've got Michelle Dobson from PNET, the Shepstone Group, who will be sharing with us about getting the job or interview skills. We will have the Q&A session, and then a thank you by the other colleague who have joined us, Mr. Beki Mzobe. So on that note, let me welcome you to the session and also welcome to Michelle. Michelle Dobson is Head of Brands for PNET. That is the leading, or South Africa's leading, online recruitment platform which connects job seekers with vacancies. Michelle, a very warm welcome again to our platform this afternoon. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Lisa. Let me share my slides here. You can just tell me if I'm visible, and then I will crack on.
We can see the slides.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to present on interview skills. And thank you to everybody that has signed in and is attending the workshop. As Lisa mentioned, I am currently Head of Brands for PNET. And for those who aren't familiar with PNET, we are an online recruitment platform that essentially connects recruiters with job seekers. In other words, vacancies with talent or employees. But today we're going to chat about how you can ace your next interview, and the structure of the forum or the presentation is to look at what you can do before, during, and after the interview. And no surprises, a lot of the content sits in the before space, because it is all about preparation. So I always start by asking, what is the purpose of a job interview? And a lot of people say, well, it's an opportunity to meet, your prospective employer, or if it's a recruitment agency that's interviewing you. And people often say it's to find out if the job and the candidates are a good fit. And that's 100% correct. But it's also an opportunity for you to find out if you are a good, if the company is a good fit for you. So it's not only a one-way interaction where, you're being sized up by the recruiter. It is also an opportunity for you to get a good sense of, is this a place where you want to work? Is this a place where you can thrive? Is this a place that is aligned to your values, and that is going to be a good fit for your personality, your career growth, etc.? So there are essentially 3 stages of an interview. Some granted, skip and merge them all into one. Some interviews are very drawn out, and the process can be 3, 4, 5 interviews. But in general, you're going to have 3 interviews with 3 different people within the business. The first one is generally starting with the recruiter. So the recruiter can either be, as I said, an agent that's working for a client or recruiting on behalf of a client from a recruitment agency. or it could be a recruiter that is hiring for a company directly. So at PNet, we have around 5,000 recruiters who work with us, of which about 80% are recruitment agencies. The other 20% are either from corporate companies or from SMEs or startups. And they are recruiters that are hiring directly for the company. So your first interview is generally not a face-to-face interview. It's probably more of a screening kind of call. And it'll either be a phone or a video call, and generally conducted by an HR person. If there isn't an HR person, for example, if it's a small to medium business, it could be the founder or the managing director, or, you know, or if it's a screening call, it could even be the receptionist or the office manager. And the first part of the interview process is really just to understand, what is your current situation? You know, what are your basic skills and experience relative to the position that's available? What broad salary range are you looking for? When can you be available? And then the recruiter in this instance will talk through the application process. In other words, what are the next steps? Your technical interview is generally with your hiring manager. So that would be conducted by the person that you will most likely be reporting to. And they might, for example, bring in other managers or peers depending on the structure of the business. So, for example, myself as head of marketing, I would have been interviewed by our CEO. But he had, in that original interview, he had the head of sales and the head of operations in that session, because the marketing team and the sales team and the operations team work very closely together. So in your technical interview, that's where you're really going to be asked those technical questions around to kind of evaluate the extent to which you can actually meet the job requirements. You know, the recruiter that's doing the screening call isn't necessarily going to know some of the industry jargon or the information about the detail of your role. But the technical interview is where, you know, is where things really start to kind of heat up, and you will be potentially asked quite tricky questions. You'll be asked scenario questions. You will be, you know, asked to talk about challenges that you've faced and problems you've overcome, you know, value that you've added to the business and how that's been demonstrated, and all sorts of things related to the actual requirement of the job. And then in some instances, there is a third interview, and that's generally with the leadership of the business, or your, you know, direct reports manager. And that's really just to suss out whether you're a good culture fit. So it'll talk about your behavior, the alignment of your values to the company's values, you know, how you handle certain things under pressure and that sort of thing. So more and more, we see that culture fit is becoming a bigger part of the interview process. It kind of used to be a screening call, then your technical interview, yep, you meet the requirements of the job, and you know, hopefully landing up in a job offer. But more and more, we're seeing that culture fit is forming a part of the interview process as almost like a standard. I love this quote by Bobby Unser that says, "Success is where preparation and opportunity meet." And that really is, it sums up an interview process so beautifully, because, you know, you want to prepare and you want to know the kind of questions you might get asked, you know, practice those stories, practice those answers to those questions, practice your own questions that you want to ask the interviewer. But it really is all about what happens in that session. And an opportunity is when, if we look at that culture fit block, it's when there really is a meeting of the minds and a meeting of the hearts, over and above, you know, your technical abilities to do to meet the requirements of the job. So before your interview, you're going to start with research. And a lot of people will look at the job spec, and, you know, that's kind of where it stops and starts. The it's important to research as much as you possibly can about both the company as well as the person that's interviewing you. So the interviewer, the most logical place is to go to the company's website. There you'll find out about the company itself, the type of work. You might get a sense of the culture. You will hopefully understand who their target market is or what they sell, whether it be products or services, to who they're selling those products, to whom they're selling those products. And then if your interviewer is part of the leadership of that business, you might get some information from the company website about them as well. Otherwise, LinkedIn is always a great source. Otherwise, you could also just do a good old stock standard Google search and see what comes up in the form of press releases or, previous work experience about the interviewer, etc. And understanding your interviewer helps you prepare for the kind of questions that you might get asked. If it's somebody that has a wealth of experience in the industry, you can expect those questions to be quite deep and quite detailed about the industry. If it's somebody who has a wealth of experience in the particular discipline, but not maybe in that particular industry or sector, again, that's going to change the kind of questions that you get asked and the kind of questions that you should be prepared to answer. Social media pages is also a good way to go and suss out the company. And social media will give more of the kind of day-to-day operations of the business. It'll give you a good sense of their kind of the tone. Are they, relaxed and informal, or are they, a very professional entity, etc. As I say, Google will call up articles, press releases. You might get a history of the company, any growth, growth or information around the development of the company, if there are any key projects that are on the go or have been on the go. And Google can also call up some red flags. I remember being invited for an interview and doing exactly this process. Google landed up with Google. And it turned out that there was lots and lots of negative press about the chairman of the business, which actually put me off the interview process. Just some really negative information about the kind of personality, potentially some underhanded dealings, just really not a good sense of the business or the culture fit. So even before you walk into that room, you'll have a good sense of what the business is about. And then if you can, chat to current employees. Obviously, a bit creepy to just rock up and start stalking people. But if you do know of anybody in the business, again, LinkedIn is really useful here. You can go and see if you have any connections in common and ask somebody to introduce you to a current employee. But that's really where you'll get some beautiful insights about the business, the management style, how the business operates. Again, that culture fit that is so important. The next thing we ask you to do is to compare your skills to the job ad. So I've taken an extract here of a job ad, and where you see desired experience and qualifications, it's a good idea to then look at every single bullet point and identify the extent to which you either meet it or don't meet it. And if you don't meet it, you need to go prepared to your interview to explain either, if you don't meet that requirement, that it's not critical to the role. In other words, you need to motivate them that you can still perform the function without that particular skill set or experience or qualification. Or if it is critical to the role, you need to be able to demonstrate how you are going to move from or close that gap. If you were successful in your interview process. So, for example, if we look here, if we look at maybe the fourth last bullet point in the bottom right-hand corner, any previous experience on a CRM system would be beneficial. So if I didn't have any experience on a CRM system, what I could do is, go and take an online course, or go and look at some YouTube videos for a very popular CRM system. So you can talk to that in your interview and say, you don't have any experience with the CRM system, but you have been looking at what software XYZ has been doing, and you feel very confident that you would be able to upskill in that area quite easily. And yeah, so as this bullet point that's just popped up there says, what will you say if you don't meet the requirements? You going into the interview and just ignoring it is definitely not the solution. But if you have the experience, it's also a great opportunity to then embellish the kind of experience that you've had. So again, looking at this example that's on there, the fourth bullet point from the top, it says cold calling experience. So go in there with some anecdotes about cold calling, how your cold calling process is, how much success you've had, what is your average conversion rate on your cold calls, etc. So matching the job spec to your current skills, as well as identifying your gaps and how you're going to close those gaps, is really going to help you feel super, super confident in that interview process. And then, as I say, if you're missing something, explain how you'll be competent without it, or how you're going to actually close that gap by upskilling. Either you've already started upskilling, or you intend to do so once you, if you were successful in your interview process. Practice your anecdotes. So your anecdotes are your little stories that add kind of your personality, add the human element to your interview process, and really demonstrate the extent to which you're able to meet the requirements of the job. And I always suggest that you practice your anecdotes out loud, because talking to yourself in your head comes out very differently, or doesn't come out. It comes out quite differently when you do eventually say those words out loud. Sometimes you can trip over some of the words that you've selected. Sometimes some of the words get all jumbled and you want to change the structure of your sentences. But really practice your stories in front of the mirror, out loud, in response to expected questions that you're going to get. So if you want to talk about an accomplishment that displays, some of the skills that you've required, think about a story that's going to demonstrate that and practice it. Talk about the time that you made a mistake, and the lesson that you learned. Recruiters are not afraid to hear that you've made mistakes. In fact, admitting to having made a mistake makes you more human. It makes you more likable. It makes you, obviously, depending on the extent of that mistake. But what is absolutely critical is to link the learning with that mistake. So we're all human. People make mistakes all the time. It probably won't be the last mistake you will have made, but it's important to then demonstrate what you learned out of that process, and how that's made you a better employee now moving forward. This is a common one, how you handled a difficult situation. So often people will ask, or interviewers will ask, how you handled the difficult situation, or how you managed to convince somebody. Like if you've had a disagreement with your direct manager about a particular approach to something, how did you manage to convince them about to go ahead with a particular direction? What's key here is, people often say, but I need to tell the truth. I'd rather they know the truth. And the truth is absolutely fine. Being authentic, being honest is 100% important in the interview process. But just make sure you frame your responses in the correct way. So again, don't blame, or don't be aggressive or derogatory to a previous employer or a current manager or anything to that extent, but rather focus on the solution that you provided. So if you talk about what that difficult situation was, and instead of kind of sitting and focusing on that, move very quickly to, this is how you overcame it, this is how you approached it, and again talk about, if it didn't go according to plan, the important lessons that you learned coming out of that situation. And then a time you went above and beyond, what was required and how did you go beyond? And this is something that, again, I recommend that you prepare in advance, because sometimes it is difficult to go above and beyond without necessarily stepping into somebody else's role or stepping onto their toes. But have these, is it 4, 5? Have these 5 anecdotes ready to talk about, because they will be, chances are they will be framed in a slightly different way. But if you have these 5 stories banked, you've practiced them over and above the prep that you've already done, the research, the matching the job description to your skills, you are already sort of 90% of the way there in terms of preparing for your interview. And then anything that crops up is not going to throw you, completely for a loop. And then again, a time you disagreed with your boss. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an argument that they're asking you about, but it could be, again, a disagreement. I have a disagreement with my boss on a regular occasion because I'm a brand marketer. He's a chartered accountant by trade. So we often have interesting and different perspectives on certain things. So a disagreement is not necessarily an argument. It's just trying to understand where the other person is coming from. And that does make for a good anecdote in terms of how did you reach an understanding, how did you either change your perception to meet to meet that person halfway, or how did you motivate and convince them to change their perception to meet you halfway. And then a list of questions you might be asked. So there are some very common interview questions, and you can, if you access the PNET blogs on our website, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see Job Seeker blog link. There's lots of information in there about potential interview questions, lots of information if you Google it, potential interview questions. The same things crop up time and time again. And as I say, you want to prepare your stories, have practiced your responses out loud, and be ready to answer those questions. So make a list of those questions, write your answers to each one, practice them out loud. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, an interview is not only for that interviewer to suss out the extent to which you would be a good fit for the company. It's also for you to understand whether the company would be a good fit for you. Because if there's no sense landing a job and in a month, 2-3 months time, you find that actually there's it's actually not a really good fit for you. So use this as an opportunity to write down your own list of questions for the interviewer as well. And make sure that they are useful questions. A lot of people ask questions for the sake of asking questions in an interview. You want to be able to ask information that you haven't already found out online. So for example, in my space, it's very important for me to know if a business or a company that I'm working for works with an advertising agency or a public relations agency, or they have a designer, in the business. So I would ask those kind of questions because it helps me understand the support system that I would have going into a business as head of brands. And that information can't necessarily be found on their website. A company wouldn't list all the partners that they're working with on their website. But it is a critical part of me understanding whether, A, I would have a good support system and enough resources at my disposal if I worked at that company, but also the extent to which this business takes branding as a discipline seriously. So if it's head of brands and one other person, that would be a red flag for me. So ask those questions, formulate those questions. It's difficult I was trying to think of some questions that you could potentially ask, and there are just so many. So it would really depend on, what you're looking for out of a company. But I've given some examples here of questions and things that you could ask. So you could ask some deep questions about your role. Again, this is an important one for me if I'm interviewing for a marketing position. What strategic function does the department report into? So is there a chief marketing officer in the business, or would I be reporting into the product person? It again, just from my personal example, it indicates to me the business's current understanding of brand marketing, how challenging it's going to be, and getting the business to understand the role of branding, etc., etc. So it could be, who does your role report into? Which departments would you be working closely with? When it comes to the interviewer themselves, you could ask them, what do you enjoy about working here? If it's your hiring manager that's interviewing you, can you talk me through or walk me through your typical work day? When it comes to company culture, absolutely ask how you would describe the work environment. Always interesting to see how different people respond to that in an interview process. Performance measurement, you could ask questions around how you're going to be evaluated, how your performance is going to be measured, how you know whether you're doing a good job. So questions there could be, how involved are employees in structuring their own goals and tasks? That'll also give you a sense of the autonomy that the business will give you in your function. How often do you evaluate employee performance? Do you have a performance structure? Do you have performance-based increases or bonuses, that sort of thing? Asking about your team or your co-workers. So, for example, this would be where I would ask about, what is the structure of the team? Are there, if the team is very small, then I would expect, partners and suppliers to be part of the business and the resources at my disposal as a marketing person. So questions there could be, what's the organizational structure of the team? Can you tell me about the team I'll be working with? Often, if you're, for me, this questions come up and they say, well, actually, you might find this one particularly challenging. So it also gives you a sense of how much of a struggle that position's going to be, or you're going to find that role walking into it, and whether you're up for that challenge. Opportunities for growth is always a big one. What type of upskilling opportunities does the company offer? Even if it's not, a formal education or formal certificates or courses, do you have a mentorship system in place? It's opportunities for growth and development is always a good one. What kind of training and development does the business offer? And then, of course, you want to ask the interviewer right at the end of the interview, what is the next process? What is the next step of the process? Can I give you my references to contact? How is this going to move forward? So that you don't leave that interview kind of not really knowing what you can expect as a next step. Okay, then talking about what you're going to wear to your interview, dress for the job that you want and not the job you have. So, the clue there is to always overdress rather than underdress. If you're unsure, dress smarter, try and stick to something subdued and classic. I always suggest getting like one good power interview suit or dress or outfit that you can go to time and time again. If you're not sure, you can, drive past the offices, get a sense of, what people are wearing when they're coming in or out. You can look online. Sometimes you can see on some of the social media posts if they've got staff events or functions. But again, if you see people dressed in jeans and trainers, rather err on the side of caution and dress a little bit smarter for your interview, and you can kind of relax into that environment if you are successful in that interview. Always wear clothes that you feel confident in. That's why I say invest in a power interview outfit that even if you dust it off every 2 or 3 years, that is your power suit that makes you just feel and look awesome. Because you're going to hold yourself in a different way. You're going to project yourself in a different way. Wear appropriate, comfortable shoes. This is one for the ladies. It's you can guarantee the only time you'll ever see me wearing high heels is in an interview. But I only wear little high heels because I know that I'm not comfortable in high heel shoes. So if you're not used to wearing those particular kind of shoes, don't go for 6-inch heels that are going to make you look incredible, but you're not going to feel good in them. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to walk strangely. Just be comfortable. Be in your skin in that interview. Don't over accessorize. So that's going back to the first bullet point there, be subdued, be classic. Yeah, and I often get asked this question about, what if you're in the creative space? And if you're in the creative space, it is slightly different. But even then, if you were interviewing for a creative position or a designer or something to that effect, I think you can still dress subdued and classic, and then perhaps have one sort of, signature piece, either, a great set of earrings for the ladies, or, a really cool pair of clean trainers for the gents, something like that. Be well groomed. I mean, it goes without saying, but you would be very surprised how many people I've interviewed that are just not well groomed. And then I've got some examples here of yes or no. So as I say, always err on the side of caution. I mean, this lady looks absolutely lovely, but her skirt is far too short. That top is maybe a little bit too sheer, maybe a little bit too sexy. Rather make sure you're wearing a pencil skirt, knee high, just again, a little bit more subdued and classic. Again, this lady looks really lovely. I wouldn't fault that outfit at all. And again, on the side of caution of wearing shirts that aren't tucked in. Jeans and denim is a big no-no. I would even, I mean, I would even go as far as to say for any interview ever. You can still, even if it's a dress down or, a creative position, something to that effect, you can still go there dressed a little bit more casual, but still professional and classic. And then the ladies are the most interesting of the lot when it comes to interview outfits. Never show midriff, never wear a boob tube top or a halter neck. Nothing that's got slits. Shorts is a big no-no. Again, that could also relate to guys. I know that you get kind of smart chinos that you can dress up, and again, straddling that creative space, but just err on the side of caution. No t-shirts. As I say, I would suggest not wearing trainers, rather overcompensate and wear a proper professional, power interview outfit, and then you can slide back into a comfort zone or something a little bit more familiar with the business once you've actually secured that position. And then empower yourself. So having wearing the right outfit is the first part to empower yourself. You're already going to feel amazing and feel confident. And if you've done all that preparation around research and matching the job spec and preparing your anecdotes, you're literally 95% of the way there. So practice a firm handshake, a strong posture, attentive body language. A lot of this is going to come if you're feeling confident and feeling prepared anyway. And call it a mantra for self-confidence. I mean, it sounds a bit woo, but mantras are incredibly powerful, So leading up to your interview, choose a line that's going to make you feel confident and feel powerful. And just, help you put your best self forward. No matter what, I will do my best. I deserve everything I desire. I am confident and value myself. Say this over and over and over as you're preparing for your interview, as you're on your way to your interview. Get enough rest and stay healthy. I mean, this is my mantra for everything. Getting enough sleep is absolutely critical, and try and get enough sleep in the days leading up to the interview, because the day before you might feel a bit nervous, you might struggle to fall asleep, you might wake up in the middle of the night, you might be going through your questions and your anecdotes in your head. So try and I don't know if this is how sleep works, but always say try and bank some sleep a couple of days before, so that you are not overtired when you wake up, ready to face that interviewer. And visualization is a very, very powerful tool, So close your eyes, almost meditative. Visualize yourself going into the room, greeting the interviewer, giving that firm handshake, sitting down, being asked the right questions, answering them in the right way. This is obviously a very powerful tool in sports, for example. A sports person will imagine themselves literally arriving at the starting line, kneeling down as the gun goes off, what they will do. So visualization, as I say, can be meditative as well, but really powerful tool to give you that confidence going into that interview. Eat wholesome, healthy meals leading up to the interview. As I say, I propose you eat wholesome, healthy meals as much as you can. Rest and fueling correctly will, it's just does wonders for the mind and for the heart and the head. And if you're an anxious person, use breathing techniques or meditation the morning of the interview. So some of you may be familiar with the grad pack that PNET has published. In there, we talk about box breathing. So if you're not familiar with box breathing, it's a really wonderful meditative tool just to kind of regather yourself. So if you Google box breathing, it will give you a very quick rundown on how that box breathing can just help you feel very centered and composed going into your interview. And then your final planning, how will you get there? Make sure that you've figured out, if you're taking public transport, leave plenty of time to get to the public transport if something happens on the way. If you're taking your own car, make sure you know how long it's going to take you, not only, 7 o'clock at night, but in peak hour traffic. Make sure you've got the correct address. If it's an office block or an office park, prepare or make sure there's enough time to sign in through security and be directed to parking and potentially walk through parkades and things like that. Prepare a day or two in advance what you actually want to take with you. Extra copies of your CV in case you want to give them a printout. If you've got a portfolio that you want to showcase, have all of that ready the day before, at the very least, so that you're not in your state of flux on the day of your interview. So as I said, the most of the work is going to be in the preparation. Once you're actually in the interview, it's really just thinking on your feet, tapping back into those anecdotes that you've practiced, thinking about the questions that the questions you've been expecting and how you're going to answer them, etc. So, and as I said, this is the technical interview is really where you can expect the higher, the trickier kind of questions that are going to ask about your experience, your skill set, the extent to which you've done certain things, etc., etc. So what I've done here is taken some of the more obvious questions. So, we get the one about tell me a bit about yourself, which is usually the start of the interview. And it always surprises me how many people are flustered right off the bat when the interviewer asks, tell me about yourself. I've seen it myself as an interviewer interviewing people. It's the easiest part to practice. And it's basically going to set the tone for the rest of your interview. So make sure that you are practicing how are you going to position yourself if they ask, tell me a bit about yourself. So there's a couple of rules here which can help you structure this kind of thinking. The most you want to talk for is 2 to 3 minutes. It sounds really short, but if you actually go and talk out loud for 2 to 3 minutes, it takes a long time, and you can cover a lot of information in 2 to 3 minutes. You don't want to cover less than that, and you don't want to ramble on, for ages, and not get to the nitty-gritty, meaty parts of the interview as well. So you're going to talk about your professional journey. You would generally start, talking about your studies or how you kind of got into a particular sector or industry, and where you're wanting your career path to go. No personal details about children, marital status, politics, religion. if an interviewer asks about these things, firstly, they shouldn't. Any I guess HR person worth their weight would understand that any of these questions are unrelated to the actual role itself, unless they're related to the role itself. So there is that, if it's, for example, marital status, if the job requires, not marital status, children. If the job requires lots of travel, for example, then it might be relevant to ask, do you have children and do you have a support structure that is going to allow you to travel? Because that is a requirement for part of the job. But if they're asking, whether you have children because they're worried that you're going to be fetching kids from school, 5 times a week, that is absolutely irrelevant to the job itself. So don't volunteer any of that information unless it is asked and unless it's a requirement of the position. Mention your experience and your skills relative to the position. So talking about what you've studied, why you've studied that particular qualification. We're going to talk about experience in a second, and your skills relative to the position. So this is looking at that job spec and saying, you're basically going to give almost like your executive summary in your CV relevant to that position that's been advertised. And for any of you that have done the presentation with me, around landing your dream job, we spend quite a bit of time talking about work experience and skills, and how you talk about transferable skills if you haven't yet entered the world of work. So here is an opportunity to talk about those transferable skills. If your requirement of your job is to project manage a particular project, and you've never done that before, you could talk about, informal projects that you've been involved in. Say, well, I've never, managed a project myself, but I am always involved in church events or XYZ. So talk about how your life experience and your life skills are going to work in your favor for the position. Again, practice your story out loud. Saying it in your head, it can come out very differently, and you don't want to be fumbling over strange words or long words, if there's an easier way to say it, and it's going to come out a bit more kind of confident and assertive, then you'll know that once you've practiced it out loud. If you're changing industries, or as I say, if you're new to a particular industry or even new to the world of work, highlight your transferable skills. How has your life experience or your work experience, even if it's casual work experience up until now, how is that going to help you how is it going to help you convince this person that's interviewing you that you are a good fit for this job and that you are going to be a valued employee? So it could even be things like, teamwork. If you are in a casual job that requires you to work with other people, that's a brilliant skill that you can talk about moving into a kind of an office environment or something like that. And then, as I say, if you're entering the job market, focus on your qualifications and your casual or volunteer work experience. So if you want to practice crafting your bit about yourself, you're going to choose your starting point. Then you're going to highlight your experience and your key accomplishments, and then explain your current situation. And that will essentially bring you to the start of your interview process. So in terms of choosing your starting point, if you're a recent graduate, mention that you've just graduated and explain why you've chosen this particular career path or field of study. If you have work experience, talk about when you graduated, and then work through your experience since your graduation. In terms of highlighting your experience and your key accomplishments, you want to talk about the work that you've done, the skills that you've learned, any key career moves that you've made, but always make sure that you're tying it in with the job that you're interviewing for. So as I say, having done that match in the preparation phase, having done that match of this is the job spec in terms of what they're looking for, this is what I currently have, and this is what I'm able to bring to the table, or the way I'm going to close my gaps. that will help you formulate your highlights, your experience and key accomplishments, particularly for this section. And then explain your current situation. So, you literally are going to do 1 or 2 sentences on this. Just explain why it is that you want to leave a particular company if you already have a job. If this is the first job you're applying for, explain why you applied for the job, and what you're looking for out of your career or out of this particular role. And why you applied for the job, the answer is always, the answer is not always, the answer is mostly to be paid. But you want to give them something that's going to indicate that, you're in it for more than just the money. It's you love the brand, or you love the social governance work that they do, or it's a great opportunity to work with a particular leader in that business, because you know that they're very innovative and entrepreneurial, or whatever it is. What is it that attracted you to this particular company rather than just a job? And then during the interview, listen carefully. You don't have to, you're not going to be critiqued on how much information you share. It's about the quality of the information that you share in the session. So answer what you're asked, and avoid any waffling or, trying to fill the gaps, because sometimes that can actually just make us more nervous when we hear ourselves waffling or going on too long. And then it becomes awkward to try and stop yourself halfway in that sentence. So just don't go there at all. And again, having that prep and practicing your anecdotes and practicing the answers you're going to give to certain questions will really help you stay on point during the interview. Answer each question with confidence, be friendly, concise, and honest. And ask your prepared questions. Sorry, I'm missing the word there. Ask your prepared questions when the opportunity arises. Sometimes it's useful to keep an interview journal, especially if you're kind of new to interviewing and you're starting to go through the process. So as you leave that interview, jot down the parts that you think you did well in, and where there were a couple of questions that maybe tripped you up or you weren't that confident answering, so that when you're preparing for your next interview, you can make sure that you're dealing with those things that made you feel uncomfortable as well. And that way you just, you're going to get better and better and better at the interview process moving forward. So other than tell me a bit about yourself, there's always this awkward topic of salary as well. And here are 5 things that are going to help you talk about or have this salary discussion in an open and honest way. I mean, with salary, you don't want to, you don't want to sell yourself short and go in there asking too little, but you also don't want to, pitch yourself too high and then you're completely out of the running. A lot of the time, you will already have had this in a screening process. That first block we spoke about in the interview process. So because that HR person or that initial screen would indicate whether you are, even in the range that the business has approved for this particular role. But this will start talking about the detail around the actual salary, the benefits, remuneration, etc. The key, again, prepare, research. The best way that you can help yourself in a salary conversation is to know what other people are being offered for a similar position in the same industry, location, and level of experience. Industry, location, and level of experience. So it's not the salary in the same role. The industry will be very different. I've worked in airlines and I've worked in banks, and I can tell you that their profit margins are very, very, very different. We're looking at probably a 3% profit margin in airlines and like a 30% profit margin in banking. So that's going to indicate what the industry is going to indicate what they are going to be able to pay you for a particular role. Location, we're all familiar with the metropolitan areas, probably paying more, especially the likes of a Gauteng, Cape Town, up and coming. So don't expect the same salary in Gauteng as you would in Port Elizabeth, even if the role is exactly the same. And of course, your level of experience. It's if you're entry level and you're starting out, you need to be comfortable that that's an opportunity for you to grow into that role. Highlight your value. Again, this is your, this is in your tell us a bit about yourself. You've got that middle block that talks about your key experiences and your accomplishments. Sell yourself during the interview. Make sure that the interviewer knows what makes you a valuable employee, and give as many examples as you can where possible. Things that you've done, how you are going to make their lives easier, the value that you're going to add. Be confident but realistic. So it's absolutely essential to go in there, backing yourself, be confident in your abilities and your worth, but also be realistic. As I say, be mindful of the company's budget constraints and the industry that you're looking at. Some industries, have, as I say, much bigger profit margins than others. And that's just going to be the reality if you choose to work within that industry. And then consider the entire compensation package. So, the actual rand value that you're going to get out is just one component of the total cost to package, the TCC. So there could be other things that they would offer as part of that package: medical aid, there might be a retirement plan, a 13th check or a guaranteed bonus, even something that's not monetary, flexible work arrangements. That might be something that you desperately need to take care of an aging parent, or take care of a baby at home. Flexible work arrangements can be a massive benefit, and especially if you're looking at recruitment within an SME where they maybe can't, compete head on with a large corporate. Things like flexible work arrangements, development, training, mentorship, the opportunity to work with senior leaders of the business in an SME, extra leave days, if they can't actually kind of compensate or meet or match your expectations in terms of a rand value, you might be able to negotiate extra leave days as a result. And your whole package would then form your compensation or your remuneration over and above just that rand value that you're going to get out every month. And negotiate strategically, if you can. And I think we're all familiar with this. Wait until you receive a job offer before discussing the compensation. So I think it's important to know what the position is offering. You do want to know what that rand value is, because if that rand value is well below what you need, firstly, and what you want, secondly, then you're probably not going to be a good fit. But if that rand value is the box and everything else is just about, it's a bonus, or it is about quality of work life. Again, looking at flexible work arrangements, or maybe it's a hybrid working model, so you can work some days remotely, which will help you not get stuck in traffic or not spend money on fuel or whatever. Those kind of things you can chat about once you've got the job offer, because then that they are, that they're backing you as well. And generally that information would be in your job offer or in your contract. So it actually gives you a really nice reference point to push back and say, oh, I see that this is a 5-day in the office position. Would it be possible to talk about a hybrid working model? Again, it needs to be fair for both parties. But by this point you would know, whether you're a good fit to a certain extent, and then you can start tweaking those little things that are going to make a big difference in your world. And then you want to show your enthusiasm. You want to, you can expect a fair compensation based on your skills and experience, but you've got to back yourself, and you've got to have demonstrated your value throughout the interview process. How are you going to add value to their business? End of story. Okay, how are we doing for time? Yes, we're good. Competency-based interview questions. So this is also something that comes up very often, along with, that awkward topic of salary, along with the how do I tell me a little bit about yourself kind of question, is what we call competency-based interview questions. The objective of a competency-based interview question is to assess your skills and abilities by asking you to describe past situations and then talk about how you handle them. So that situation can be anything. You know, the interviewer could throw one of those curveballs that we looked at earlier. Hopefully, if it is one of the ones we looked at earlier, you will have covered it in your practice. But if they say, tell me about a time that you disagreed with your manager and how that played out. Tell me about the time where you had to, give critical feedback to a colleague. Tell me about the time you experienced, missed the deadline and how you managed it. Whatever those situations could be, you need to be able to think on your feet in order to respond to those questions. So some of them will be more obvious and hopefully you will have practiced them, but some of them, they could be hundreds of questions that could come up here. So there is, thankfully, a structure to answering these kind of questions. In your responses, you want to focus on things like communication, how you all kind of discussed it and spoke about it, the extent to which there was teamwork involved, how you showed leadership, how you solved a particular problem, how you were able to adapt, those sort of things. So when it comes to communication, describe a situation where you had to communicate a difficult message to a colleague. Tell me about the time you experienced conflict with a team member and how you resolved it. Describe a situation where you had to lead a team or a project. Describe a time that you had to solve a complex problem at work. And describe a situation where you had to adapt to a new work environment or team. So these are all examples of questions that could come up in order for the interviewer to test how competent you are in the field of communication, teamwork, leadership, problem solving, or adaptability, which are all very key soft skills that an employer would be looking for. And sorry, 6.1, and conflict resolution. Describe a situation where you had to resolve conflict with a colleague or a client. So the beauty of responding to these kind of questions is that there is a tried and tested method or approach called the STAR method. And the STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. So you're going to start by talking through that particular situation, and then you are going to speak about, you're going to provide concrete examples and details in your responses. You're going to focus on the outcome. So when it comes to A, highlight the positive results of your actions, and then relate it to your experiences to the job requirement. Show how your skills and abilities align with the role. As always, rehearse your answers out loud to various competency-based questions across those different fields: communication, teamwork, leadership, conflict, etc. So I'm going to take us through an example now so you can see how the STAR technique plays out in real life. So follow this guide when you're asked to give specific real-world examples. Before any interview, brainstorm and practice answers to potential questions and think of personal examples to use. So if, for example, the question that I've been asked by the interviewer is, take me through a time when you showed some sort of initiative or innovation in your role. So we're going to go to the STAR technique. The start of it is to listen to the question. So make sure you understand what you're being asked to respond to. And you'll generally have about 5 to 8 seconds to think of a particular scenario. So a personal scenario that you want to be able to talk through. And then you're going to start working with the STAR method. So your 1 second summary is really just you reiterating to them, this is an example of the time when I showed innovation in your role. So it's kind of giving that question back to them. And then you're going to start with S, the situation. In the situation, you're going to really just explain the context and give the background into the example that you're going to talk through. So the example that I'm going to share here is, I was part of the customer service team we had poor customer satisfaction scores. In other words, our customers were telling us that they weren't satisfied with our customer service, and we received lots of complaints due to the inconsistency of our service levels. So depending on who the person was dealing with, they were getting different service. So it wasn't a consistent service offering that the business was giving them. That's the context that I'm going to give the interviewer about the example that I'm going to talk through to demonstrate innovation. Then we're going to move on to T, which is task. Here you're going to talk about the challenge and your actual role in that particular challenge. What was the part that you played in this particular challenge? So carrying on with our customer service example, I could say, well, being one of the senior team members in the customer service team, I was tasked. In other words, I was asked to do something. I was asked to propose ideas on how to improve the situation. Then we're going to explain what you actually did, how you handled that situation, or how you overcame the challenge. So I've explained to them this was the context. I was part of the customer service team. The business was unhappy that we were getting poor scores and that the service level was inconsistent. I was asked to propose ideas on how to improve the situation. And the first thing I did was reviewed the results of our customer surveys and all of the data that we had collected. And then I called a meeting with some of my peers and asked for their input through a brainstorming exercise. So you can see in this example, it's not even necessarily how I would have, come up with a solution, but it's how I drove the business to come up with some sort of innovation in this particular role by calling this meeting, having this brainstorming session, bringing the data to this particular forum. And then under results, we're going to talk about what did you actually achieve through the process. And again, you want to talk about the role that you played, but it could be a team effort because, teamwork is part of the world of work as well. So the results could be to say that, we implemented X, Y, Z, and the number of complaints decreased by 20% in the month following implementation. And 3 months later, it decreased by 50%. So you want to talk through, this is the example you're going to share. This is the role that you were asked to play in that particular situation. This is how you handled it or how you overcame the challenge. And then these are the results once the solution was implemented. And then after the interview, try and get the contact details of your interviewer. So you would probably have them from the interview that was set up, or you could ask the HR person if they had set up the interview, and follow up with a very brief message on the same day of the interview, just saying, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful to meet you. Looking forward to hearing back. Something like that, just so that you're top of mind at the end of that process. Do not call every day asking if you got the job. And this is so hard. I mean, the whole job hunting process can really be exhausting. So, but it's not going to help to irritate your interviewer or irritate your recruiter. That's why I say it's so important at the, as part of your interview process to ask the question, what are the next steps? What can I expect from here on out? Even if they say it's going to take a week, or we're still interviewing somebody else, or the person that needs to, sign off on it is away, things change. It could take 2 weeks. If it's dragging on and it's now become 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and they said 1 week, then by all means follow up. But, really don't harass your interviewer asking for, for the next steps. It's in their best interest, probably as much as yours, to fill that vacancy. It obviously just means that something else is happening in their world or in the business that needs their attention right now. If you unfortunately didn't get the job, still let them know that you're interested. Thank them for their, the opportunity. Ask for feedback. There's, it's a very brave request to say, well, is there anything that, in the interview process that you were uncomfortable with, or the chances of you seeing this person again are very, very slim, and it really could help you maybe a very silly thing that you can work on that'll help you for your next interview, and let them know that you're still interested. So, I'm disappointed that I didn't get the job, but, if something changes, or, if I can work on X, Y, Z, and, by all means, please let me know, and I'd be happy to come back in for an interview. What's done is done. Don't obsess over the process. There's, as I said, keeping an interview journal, I have found, especially in the early stages of my career, to be very, very useful to go back and say, oh, this question tripped me up. How will I answer this in the next interview if it comes up? But once you've done that and you've kind of picked out one or two key things that you want to work on for the next interview, don't obsess about the one that you've just had. Forget about all that I should have said, and and things that, better anecdotes that you could have come up with, a better star technique that you could have used. It's what's done is done. Take a mental break from the process. We always suggest that you go and visit some friends rather than family, because family will probe. They want to be supportive, but they'll ask you, how did the interview go? What did you do? What did you say? When will you hear back from them? Whereas friends will be a little bit, they might not even know that you've gone for an interview, but they'll be a little bit more on the sort of back burner, and they might be supportive, but then they're not going to ask you to replay the whole thing, which family tend to do. Don't overanalyze every single little response that you gave. Focus on the big picture. If overall it went well, or you prepared 80% of it and you did well on your 80%, but the 20% was not great. Fix the 20% for the next time, but don't overanalyze on things that you could have and should have said. As I say, select that one takeaway, that one thing that you would have wanted to answer differently, and focus on it for the next interview. But for now, just take a mental break after that interview, and always keep pursuing other possibilities, regardless. We see so many candidates that stop as soon as they've got that first interview. They just stop looking, and they hang all of their hopes on this one position, and things change. That businesses withdraw vacancies from time to time, or there might be a hiring freeze, or the restructure in the business. Anything can change. So keep pursuing other possibilities, literally until you have signed a contract on the dotted line, and always think of it as an opportunity to practice your interview skills. In the early days of my career, I would go for interviews for jobs that I knew I didn't really want, just to get a sense of different ways of being asked questions, how to formulate answers, building that confidence, just getting better, and move past this interview and be stronger for the next one. That really is all there is to do after an interview. Be better on the next one, and again, as humans, as humans, learn from your mistakes rather than obsess over them. And then in terms of dealing with anxiety, so it says, a good laugh and a long sleep are two of the best cures for anything. As I said earlier, I always talk about, eating healthy as well. So laughter, sleep, and putting good nutritious food into your system will go a long way. Go for a walk, a run, a good aerobic workouts. Anything that's going to help you keep moving is going to help with your anxiety, and also help, not obsess over what's just happened. As I say, see your friends, not your family. You can see your family, but maybe just not right away. They are going to ask you to play out, your whole interview step by step. So see your friends and just take some downtime, and focus your brain power elsewhere. Go and watch a cheesy TV reality show, or read an easy to read book. Just take the brain power down a bit. It to be kind of switched on for a full hour and putting your best foot forward can be really draining. So just give yourself the time after your interview to almost decompress and take a breather. Sleep. It's one of my favorite things is resting. Everything looks better in the morning. So get a good night's rest, and okay, I can almost guarantee half of that anxiety will be gone in the morning. Then you can start thinking of, well, you know, what did I do? What did I say? Can I do it better? But you're not kind of doing it at the same heightened emotional capacity that you would have if you've just left that interview. Then in terms of the PNET resources, I speak about this in all my presentations. We do have a number of resources available for graduates and entry-level candidates that can help you with certain things. The grad pack is downloadable from our website, pnet.coza/blog/grad pack. And that's jam-packed with tips and advice from setting up your PNET profile, talking about transferable skills, crafting your CV, all the way to interview tips, and how to kind of handle the first three months of your work. And then we've got the Job Scoop newsletter on LinkedIn, and we've also done a couple of live streams on social media around the Job Scoop, and that's really just about ways in which we can support candidates and job seekers on their career journey as they enter the world of work. Okay, I will share these. I'll share all of this in the chat. It's really just a couple of blogs that we've got up on the PNET website that talks a little bit more about interviews and 6 do's and don'ts, some more interview tips that you can possibly dive into and get ready for your next interview. And that's it. Good luck out there.
Thank you, Michelle. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. So while we attend to those questions, I'm also just going to open up the microphones. If you would like to ask Michelle a question now, you can just raise your hand. Just click on the raise button, and Michelle will then answer your question. There was a comment from Rafilu about I messed up my first interview last month. Surely these tips will help me in the future. So I then asked Rafilu if she would mind sharing, what is the main thing that they were reflecting on after the interview. So she said that struggle to fully articulate my experiences. Going forward, practicing this will be beneficial, and I should ensure that I present all relevant experiences instead of hoping to squeeze it in for later. So thank you for sharing that, Rafilu. It's what, Michelle, you were also talking about, that reflection that you do after the interview. So not to obsess, but just to be aware of what are some of the aspects that you think you could have done differently, and how would you prepare to do so for the next time.
Yeah.
Michelle, there was an interesting question here, the whole thing around handshakes. I think also, just in my personal experiences post-COVID, especially, people are not so fixated on, physical touching. So even handshakes, I often get into situations where the person wouldn't even extend their hand for a handshake, for example. But there was a question, I don't understand a firm handshake. I have soft hands. What does it mean for or about a person? So maybe we can just talk a bit about the firm handshake.
Yeah, this is interesting because, I think in a post-COVID world, touching strangers has become very topical. I think you will, and Lisa, you just alluded to it, you will get your cues from the interviewer. So if you walk into a room and the person, kind of stands up from behind a desk, they will already start extending their hand if they're expecting a handshake. So take your cues. If you are uncomfortable, I am not a great toucher of strangers, so I'm still in my COVID bubble. I sanitize my hands all the time, and it's not a reflection on anybody that I'm shaking hands with. I just am uncomfortable with public spaces, maybe a little bit OCD. But so if you are uncomfortable with it, then then take your sanitizer, or let them know beforehand if you are really uncomfortable with it, because I think any recruiter would respect, or interviewer would respect your boundaries if they knew that it was an uncomfortable space for you. So before you even go to that interview, say, just maybe to the screener, say, like, this is how I feel about handshakes, so that we're all on the same page. But you can take your cues if you're not, if you can kind of take it or leave it. You can take your cues from the interviewer as you walk into the room. And what I mean by a firm handshake is sometimes a handshake. So don't practice handshakes with friends and family. Often a handshake can be quite limp. It's not like there's no sort of, what do we call it, structure, or I guess structure in the wrist. So it can be quite limp, and to shake somebody's hand like that is actually worse than just not shaking hands at all. So you want to grip somebody's hand, and this sounds ridiculous, but it can really make or break a first impression. So don't shake people that you're comfortable touching. Go and shake their hands and ask them for their opinion on, how is my handshake? Does it show confidence? If you've got soft hands is fine, but it's all in your wrist. You want to be confident, but you don't want to be aggressive and kind of go in there and grip the person and crush their fingers. You want to be somewhere in between. And again, Google is your best friend. You can probably Google, firm handshake, how to have a firm handshake, and you'll probably find YouTube videos that you can go and look at what they mean by a firm handshake. But you don't want to be aggressive and breaking fingers, but you don't want to be limp and come across as a pushover or a wallflower or something like that.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And maybe also to that point, there was also a question about, or Malou is mentioning, I have always made a mistake when I greet interviewers. Am I supposed to greet them when I get into the interview room? If so, is saying good morning or good afternoon enough? So do you just go in, you greet, you say good morning or good afternoon? Does it become like, how are you? How do you manage that entrance?
Yeah, I mean, I would always use the name. I would always use any person's name if you have it. In an interview, talking to a waiter, if you have somebody's name, address them by their name. So if you know that you are meeting with Mrs. Jones, walk into the room, as I say, take your cue from what Mrs. Jones does as you walk into the room. And if they want to lean forward and shake, say, hello, Mrs. Jones, pleased to meet you, or good morning, Mrs. Jones. And I would ask how they're doing, but in a very relaxed way. So, morning, Mrs. Jones, how you doing? And then Mrs. Jones will probably say, yes, fine, thank you, take a seat. And that literally is enough. But I think if you have the interviewer's name, which you should, because you will most likely have been given that information, hopefully, because you'll want to go and have researched that person. Use their name. It's a really good way to build rapport very quickly with that person.
And then Maleu is also saying that if I am a stutterer, should I let them know that I stutter, and when should I tell them?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, I don't know. I mean, my personal opinion would be that you tell them up front. So if you are a stutterer, preparation is going to be probably even more critical, because you want to feel as comfortable as possible in that process so that there's very little that can throw you off guard. I would probably tell them, if it was me, I would say something almost immediately. As soon as I've entered the room, hello, Mrs. Jones, nice to meet you. And, as they say, take a seat or whatever it is, say, thank you so much. Just to make you aware, this is what's happening. So I would address it right off the bat, just so that you're both on the same page, and it's not going to become uncomfortable as the interview progresses, or as the questions become trickier, and then you're starting to feel less confident in that process anyway.
Michelle, maybe also from my side, If you have some form of accommodation that needs to be made for you. So let's say, for example, you've got some kind of disability, you're in a wheelchair, you will need access to a building that you go to for the interview. If I hear you correctly, it's also much better to share those things beforehand.
Yes,
So that they can be aware if there needs to be any accommodations made, that they can also prepare for you.
absolutely. And interviewers are people, they're people like
Mm.
you and me. Um, and for the most part, interviewers are not trying to trip you up. They're just trying to make sure that they're going to get the best person for the position that can help them, achieve what they need to achieve in their own roles.
Okay, I see a hand from Shabalala is the surname. You're welcome to unmute and ask your question. Is it Mr. or Miss Shabalala? Okay, if you're struggling to unmute or if your microphone is not working, you're welcome to ask in the chat. We will also attend to the questions there. Kayelele is now asking, while we're on the stuttering topic, does stuttering lower your chance of getting a job?
I mean, it shouldn't. It absolutely shouldn't, as long as you can meet the requirements of that role, and you are able to demonstrate how you are going to add value in that position. Um, people will come with a whole lot of things specific to them, but as long as it all boils down to you can do the role, or you're prepared to learn on the role, and you are going to add value in that position. That's really the crux of an interview, is to demonstrate the value that you can bring to the business in exchange for what they're prepared to pay you. So it absolutely shouldn't.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Then there's also a question around salaries. So you did share some information. The question is now how to answer the interviewer if they persist that you give them a salary range. So maybe just going back to what you presented is that, the importance of doing research around, what the value of your job is, but also the industry.
Yeah.
So that would help you to answer that kind of question confidently, but also taking into consideration your needs, plus the value that you think you can add to such an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you actually can't go into an interview asking for a particular salary without having done your homework around what people are getting paid in that business. If I mean, I'll use an example. My sister's got diabetes, so she has very high medical bills. So she knows that she needs a job that's going to, at the very least, cover, those high medical bills. But just because she has that as a requirement doesn't mean she can go into a business and ask for that amount of money if that job is, in all other scenarios, not going to pay that salary. So the research and just looking at what's out there on job platforms, and what's being offered, speaking to people, that's where your conversation about salary is going to start. And then your answer would be, you can answer your interviewer with a range and say, well, I've seen that the expected salary range for this position is from X to X, but obviously it depends on what other benefits would be included, or whether it's a flexible working model, and that's when you start talking about your total package, as opposed to just your salary.
Okay, just going to back. I don't see any other hands. Mr. or Miss
Hi.
Shabalala, are you ready? There you go. You can ask your question.
Okay. Sorry about that. I had a network challenge. That's why I'm back and forth.
No
Thank you so
problem.
much for this very amazing informatics section. We are really, really do learning, taking notes. All the pages are almost full. I need to ask something. How do I ask any question? Other panel members, they will say, do you have any other question? after you're done with your interview. At that time, you are stressed, you are worried, but you want to ask the questions that will be fruitful, at the same time beneficial for you, without being desperate for the position. Also, to bear in mind, let's say you have to leave your current job to go and look for them. How do we address that one? And then the second one that I have, you've mentioned something when we talking about, tell us about yourself. Do you have any method, just like we're using the star, or as long as you're gonna state your qualification and your experience and then you're selling yourself? I'm sorry about my question because these things always stresses me out, especially for an interview. And then
No, not
the
at all.
okay, and then the third one is that you've mentioned something where we have to specify, why do you want to leave your current work? Like, is there any professional way to not dish your current, also to looking forward to this
Yeah.
new position? I've missed that one. Maybe it was because of network I could not get it right.
Yeah, it is a tricky one. I'm going to
Mm.
start with that since that's the last question.
No,
Why are
it's
you
not.
leaving?
It's almost.
Have you got another question?
Yeah, that one was. Oh, the last one is, how do I politely explain them to further explain the question? Sometimes you, because you worry, to stress, anxiety, and all of that, you end up missing the question. But then, if they were to further explain it to you, you might get the question right. So, how do I politely, professionally ask them? So, can you please give? I'm not sure, are we allowed to say, can you give an example, or we can only ask them to further explain? That will be all. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the first question you had was, how do we, at the end of your interview, do you have any other questions? So what I would say is, so it's difficult for me to give you questions to ask because it depends what what you've already discussed in the interview process, what you've already found out through your research, and what is important to you in that company. As I said, I would always ask about next steps. Even if you have no questions about the role or the organizational structure or the company culture or the person's management style or how they measure the success of their staff, or if they've got any training and development opportunities. All of those can and would be valid questions, but even if you have covered all of that in your interview process, or you feel you've got enough information that you don't want to ask any more questions, definitely leave with the question, what are the next steps? What can I expect from here? Either they're interviewing other people, you might be the last person that they've interviewed. They would be able to give you a timeline, which can definitely help with your kind of anxiety in the days after the interview, to understand when you can expect to hear back from them. So that would be, that would be the absolute, I would definitely end with that question, if not any of the others. In terms of, tell me a bit about yourself, where were we here? So the STAR technique works really well for those competency-based questions, to explain a scenario. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the slide here. Close your eyes. But the tell me a bit about yourself, you'd need to go and structure it yourself. And it's essentially these 3 points. Choose your starting point. So for me, for example, I have been working for a long time, 27 years. So for me to go back and start talking about when I graduated is not relevant, So my starting point would be much later in my career if I was going to go for an interview for a new job now. But if you're a recent graduate, talk about, why you chose to study this particular field, and what you're hoping to get out of your career. If you have work experience already, talk about when you graduated, and then, the work experience that you've had in the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Then you're going to talk about your accomplishments and experiences. In fact, I'm going to quickly see. Yes, here. I'm going to unhide this slide. This is basically my blurb And you'd be surprised that this takes 2 minutes 25. So it looks like a lot of information, but when you're talking through it, it's 2 minutes and 25 seconds. So my starting point is I talk about, after I matriculated, I took a gap year overseas and did some odd jobs. And then I started I studied travel and tourism and started working at Comair, and realized quite early on that I love brand marketing and came across it purely by chance. Then you're going to highlight your experience and your accomplishments. So my blurb starts with, I worked my way up to brand manager in marketing, and then after 9 years, I moved to Cell C. After that, I was seconded to work on a team called the Red Bull Mobile Project. And shortly after that project launched, I moved to Cape Town and started working for Adidas, did this, that, the next thing. And after 3 years at RCS, I wanted to, so this is me talking about why, this is answers your next question, why are you leaving? So I explain here why, because people always say, why on earth would you leave Adidas to go and work for RCS Credit and Insurance? My strategy, which I talk about in my blurb, because I know it's going to be a question that's going to come up in the interview. I wanted to expand my knowledge around performance marketing, and I was asked to join the digital agency, etc. And then, so you're going to highlight your experience and your accomplishments. So this is the work I've done. If it's not formal work, as I mentioned earlier, talk about your life experience and how you can take those skills and they're transferable into the world of work. And then you're going to end with your current situation. I'm keen to move into a role that's, that will give me X opportunity to grow or whatever it is. So that'll talk about why. You could actually talk about why you're leaving in your tell me a bit about yourself blurb. And I would, they often say people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Sorry, I think somebody just needs to put themselves on mute. Thanks. They say people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So even if that is accurate and you do not get on with your manager, or you've been overlooked for a promotion, or you don't feel you're getting the recognition you deserve, don't say those things in your interview, please. Those might all be true, and I would absolutely not tell you to lie or be dishonest or not be authentic, but rather focus on the positive about what you want to get out of your move. So if you, for example, are not feeling valued by your current manager and you feel that you're not getting the recognition you deserve, then say, don't harp on that. Rather talk about, I'm looking to, work with a company where my experience and my skill set is valued, etc., etc. Or I would also very much caution people leaving just for a salary increase, because, once you get used to living within a certain higher salary, it's going to come back to all the other things anyway: teamwork, your manager, your relationships, your flexibility, your commute to the office, etc. So there are always positive ways to explain why you want to leave a particular job. And my advice is always go prepared to explain those situations. But focus on why you want to move forward as opposed to why you want to leave where you currently are, if that makes sense. So it could be growth opportunities. It could be, as I say, working with a particular person in the business. It could be a brand, that company's brand that's attracted you. There would be a number of reasons, but try not to focus on any dispute or disagreement with your boss or money, because those things can, so you don't want to be seen as a troublemaker, but you also don't want to just be seen as chasing the money. And then if you don't understand, if you don't hear a question correctly, your last question was, how do you ask that person to repeat a question? And you literally can just do exactly that. So if you I had a disastrous interview once, an absolutely disastrous interview. They were asking If I tell you the story, you'll know exactly who the interview was with. But let's just say I didn't understand the question. And I spent far too long trying to think of not even what my answer could be, but what the question was actually asking. And so by the time I started answering the question, I knew I hadn't really understood the question completely. I was already starting to sweat on my top lip. It was, instead of just saying, I'm sorry, could you repeat that question, or would you mind rephrasing? That's also a good way to say it. Would you mind rephrasing that question? That's going to buy you another couple of seconds to start thinking of a response and getting your head going, but it's also going to make sure that you are answering the right question. What I did was I didn't understand the question. I took a guess as to what the question could mean. It was completely wrong. And then I waffled on, getting more and more anxious and just sounding more and more ridiculous. And needless to say, I did not get the job, which I'm very grateful for, because everything worked out perfectly as it should have in the next interview with a different company. But yeah, you're quite well within your rights to say, would you mind repeating that question? Not a stress at all, or rephrasing that question.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you for all of those questions. We have run out of time, but I am just going to quickly give Lucia the opportunity to ask her question. Michelle, you still okay on time?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Okay, we'll try to wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so. Lucia, you're welcome to unmute and ask.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'll make it as quick as possible. So in regards to work experience, I am in my final year of studies, and it is very difficult to find a job that does not require work experience. So most of the people ask for work experience. But in my specific situation, I'm studying social work. So I have over 1,000 hours of work integrated learning in practical settings. Should I take the leap of faith and still send in my CV for if they require maybe 1 to 2 years experience? Because in my practical setting at the organizations, I do run my own programs. And then if they ask for my work experience, can I just explain to them what I did in the practical setting? So mostly it's about the leap of faith and going a bit above what they require during their yeah.
Absolutely, Lucia. I would do exactly what you have suggested. So I would take the leap of faith. Again, there's 3 things you want to be focused, well, 2 things you want to be focusing on. The first one is, what is the value that you can bring to that organization? So as long as you're able to demonstrate the value, you are already streets ahead of the next person. You know, what can you bring to them that is going to make it worth their while to give you money in exchange? You know, demonstrate your value. And linked to that, which you've already answered yourself, is how are you going to be able to deliver that value if you don't have 1 to 2 or 3 years work experience? And you've already answered that yourself in terms of the practical work that you've done. So even though it's not formal work, it is work in inverted commas that has led to you growing and developing certain skills. And transferable skills at the beginning of your career, transferable skills either from one job to the next or from life experience, or in your case, you know, the practical work, is going to add value. You can bring value to that organization because of skills A, B, and C that you have honed or grown or developed through your practical work. So it doesn't have to be formal paid for or casual, you know, or even casual paid for work. It can be volunteering, it can be community development, it can be charity work, it can be practical work, as you've explained. Without a doubt, that is going to, as long as you can take, this is what I've done, these are the skills I've developed through what I've done, and this is how I can these skills are going to help me bring value to your organization, then there's absolutely no reason why, as long as those 1 to 2, 3 years, you've already developed the same skills as somebody that would have had those 1, 2, 3 years in a formal work environment. So absolutely take the leap of faith. My very first job, I did exactly that. I took the leap of faith. They said they want exactly 1 to 2 years experience, and in my response, in my cover letter, I said, I have these skills, I have this personality trait. I can basically doing that exercise to say I can meet these requirements. And when it came to the requirement of 1 to 2 years work experience, I said I don't yet have any work experience, but in 1 to 2 years I will. That is literally what I said. And it became quite a fun thing in the interview process to say, they had a chuckle at that, because I demonstrated the value that I could bring to their organization regardless of not having the 1 to 2 years of work experience. So, and then got the job. So absolutely take the leap of faith.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure, good luck.
Thank you, Michelle. And then the last question on the chat. You spoke about doing follow-up after the interview. Is there an acceptable period that you need to wait to ask for such feedback? Or, what are your suggestions to approach that process?
So when you approach that, so I would follow up to say thank you for your time. I would follow up within the same day, preferably within an hour or two after the interview. So that's just a short email to say, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely to meet you. I look forward to hearing back. The time frame of when you expect to hear back, you should have left that interview understanding from their perspective what the next steps are. So that'll indicate how quickly, or when you should follow up if you haven't heard back from them. So as your final question, if they say, do you have any questions? So if they haven't given you that information voluntarily, ask them what you can expect in terms of next steps in the process. If they say, the hiring manager is on leave, he's only back on the 20th of April, you're not going to hear back from them before the 20th of April. In fact, you probably know that once that manager gets back on the 20th of April, it's still going to be another week for him or her to, get back into the swing of things. So if you haven't heard by the end of April, then maybe start following up. But if they've indicated that you should know by the end of this week, and, by the middle of next week, you still haven't heard back, that's a very different scenario, because you haven't been told that there's any reason why it isn't moving forward. So make sure that you ask in your interviews, what can I expect in terms of the process? What are the next steps in the process? When am I likely to hear back from you? And then, build in a couple of days buffer, because life happens. Actually work happens to interviewers, and then follow up, 2 or 3 days after that. But you shouldn't have to make that up. You should be asking that as your final wrap up of the interview.
Okay, thanks very much, Michelle. I'm just going to make a couple of announcements, and then we'll end off today's session. I guess we can stay here the whole afternoon talking about interview skills.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of things that we want to know and we feel unsure about. Okay, so just from our side, please note that we will have another one of these sessions on Thursday. We will be talking about job searching, but specifically CV writing in a changing world of work. And then on the 8th of April next week, we'll be talking about developing emotional intelligence for career growth. So please also go check on the My Unisa events calendar for those invitations, and register for the session as you did for this one this afternoon. And then just our contact details, I will also post it in the chat, but you're welcome to email us if you have any follow-up questions, or make an online appointment then with one of our student counselors to chat about your career development and developing the skills that you need, even also for things like interview skills. Then on our website, as well as our YouTube channel, we've got several resources that you can also use to further develop your employability skills. And then we also just want to ask you if you've got 2 minutes to provide us with feedback on today's session. It just helps us to know what it is that we can do differently for future career talks. So on that note, I'm just going to ask my colleague, Mr. Beki Mzobe, if he will just end off the session for us. Thank you, Beki.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. As we conclude this session, on behalf of Unisa Directorate, Counselling and Career Development, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our speaker, Ms. Michelle Dobson, for her insightful and engaging presentation on interview skills. Your expertise and practical advice have provided us with invaluable strategies to navigate job interviews with confidence, ranging from understanding interview do's and don'ts, mastering the art of making a lasting impression, handling tricky salary request discussions. You have equipped us with the tools to approach job interviews more effectively. Your guidance has not only inspired us, but also empowered us to take charge of our career journeys with greater assurance. A sincere thank you also to everyone who attended and participated in this session. We appreciate your engagement and enthusiasm. We hope that you will take these lessons forward and apply them in your professional endeavors. Once again, thank you, Michelle, for your time, knowledge, and dedication to helping job seekers succeed. We truly appreciate your contribution. Wishing everyone success in their career pursuits. Thank you all. Back to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Becky, and thank you also again, Michelle.
Thanks.
We really appreciate your contribution, and we hope to see you again at some time on this platform. So we
Thank you
also
so
hope,
much.
thanks, Michelle. And then we also hope that this is not the last time that we see you as attendees on the platform. As I said, please go and check out on the My Unisa events calendar for the next events and book for those. As normal, we are recording, or we have recorded the session. You will receive an email to get a notification with a link to the recording. And we will also publish an edited version on our YouTube channel. I've posted the link in the chat. So with that, I hope all of you have a lovely afternoon, and we will see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.